Good morning. Okay, so today we're going to be doing something that is sort of a practice final exam. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a problem. It's structured similarly to how we're going to how the final is structured, and we're going to sort of work through it. So I'll go ahead and tell you that the primary issue in this problem is one that has to do with licenses, because that's what we just covered. But there's other stuff there too. So let me put it in the chat for you. Just a second. And there's just a little bit more. Okay. So Tom is the fee simple owner of Firefly, a beachfront villa. The villa also houses a bed and breakfast for tourists. In 2010, Tom tells his niece, Catherine, that she can live with him at Firefly rent-free for as long as she desired, provided she assisted Tom with the cooking for the tourists and did the necessary repairs to the villa. Tom explained to Catherine that he was unable to pay her as much as she earned in her previous job. Catherine gave up her job as a live-in helper, which paid very well, and moved into Firefly. Catherine was afraid of burglars, so she installed a high-tech security system at Firefly. Tom was present when Catherine had the security system installed. Catherine also installed new windows to the guest rooms at Firefly because the old windows were damaged in a storm in 2013. The installation was very costly. Catherine had discussed these repairs with Tom before repairing the windows. At that time, Tom told her to go ahead. Tom sells the Firefly to Jim. Jim has served Catherine with a notice to quit the Firefly. Advise Catherine. And before we start advising Catherine, Joshua, I would like you to check your display name, please. Okay. Now that I've sort of mentioned that, let's start advising Catherine, okay? And the first step of this, right, the first puzzle here is that you got to find the issues that are involved in this problem, okay? So the first step in this is to ask the question, if I'm Catherine, what's my first priority here?
um, to know if it was right for her to be served that notice to quit.
Right. Do I really have to move out? Okay. Now, in the real world, right, the odds are very good that Catherine's actual first concern is, where am I going to live? Right? She's not going to bother fighting the notice to quit because of the issues related to time. But in the world of a law school exam, right, we can ask the question, does she have to move out at all? Okay. So in order to answer that question, we have to understand what her rights are. So what label would we put on Catherine's rights? What sort of rights does she have here?
Human rights.
I mean, yes, until she doesn't. But what property rights does she have? So Bonnie says that she's a tenant. Bonnie, why do you say that? What what facts give rise to that conclusion?
Um, I think Bonnie said that because Tom invited her to live there rent free, and from the question, it doesn't seem like she has any legal interest because Tom is the fee simple owner. So that's my view.
So, Kara, you think that there's no tenancy. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I think.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Because I don't really see her having any um legal interest in Firefly. So
What's missing? What don't you see to suggest that she has a legal interest?
um well, we are told that Tom is the fee simple owner, but we don't know anything about Catherine other than she's living there rent free and that she done repairs here and there and other stuff. So
So
uh,
so okay, so that's what we're told. My question is, what are you looking for that would suggest a tenancy that you're not finding? Bonnie
uh,
Bonnie says that the living arrangements constitute a tenancy. So what do you think is missing from the fact pattern to create a tenancy?
um
A
possession.
title deed? Is it a title deed?
I'm sorry, say that again, Bryce.
Is it a title deed?
I mean, more broadly, there's no lease, right? Doesn't matter whether it's been executed via contract or executed via deed, there's no lease, right? Without the lease, you don't have a tenancy. So So Bonnie says that there's a sense of legal entitlement, although it's not stated on paper, right? Bonnie is correct that there is absolutely a contractual relationship here. Okay, we have the all the elements of a contract: offer, acceptance, consideration, legality, capacity, right? We have all of that. Okay, but what we don't have is the necessary documentation to comply with the statute of frauds, which means that this contract cannot provide an interest in land. So a lease, a tenancy is an interest in land. And so no paper, no lease, no tenancy. So what right does Catherine have?
Is it equitable? Not an equitable.
We are not talking about equity at all yet. We are talking about law. So what legal right does Catherine have? We'll talk about equity in a minute, okay? But we're not there yet. Kiandra, say more about this. What makes you think it's a license?
Not a trust.
Kiandra, go ahead. So what makes a license a bare license? As opposed to a different kind of license, right? What makes it a bare license? Right. So you get with a bare license, you get the license without having done anything to earn it or deserve it or whatever, right? So is that the case on these facts? Is there no consideration to support Catherine's license?
I would say yes, there is consideration because she's supposed to cook and whatever else. So there is consideration.
I agree, right? So we're not talking about it, and let's just sort of be very clear about something, right? A bare license is a legal construct that we created to give an explanation for things out in the real world that don't fit otherwise, okay, right? The fact that somebody can come up to your front door and knock on your door and try and sell you a vacuum cleaner, or candy and wrapping paper if it's a 13-year-old, that is that's where the bare license comes from, is that we have this thing out in the world that doesn't make a lot of sense given our sort of conceptions of property, right? You can't come onto my land without being a trespasser unless you're, coming up to deliver the mail. Well, there has to be something there. right? There has to be some right there because the right to exclude is an in rem right. And so the bare license comes in to explain why the postman can step into your front yard to deliver the mail. Okay? So we have consideration. So what kind of license is there when there is consideration? Right, a contractual license, okay? So under what circumstances can a contractual license be revoked? At law. At law. Let me add that. Under what circumstances can a contractual license be revoked at law? So, Bonnie, what do you mean by illegality? So if Catherine stops doing the cooking, then Tom is entitled to throw her out. Is that what you're saying? Okay, so like, you know, if you have a license to stay in the dorms, right, here at UE, and you um, and you know break the university's rules and regulations. I don't know what those might be, but whatever they are, right? Um, then the university can say, okay, you can no longer live here, right? And what remedies at law do you have? What like contractual remedies, right? You know, you're entitled to the money you spent in performing the contract, and if you have expectation or consequential damages, maybe, right? That's a whole different issue. Um, but absolutely the costs of performance. Um, so and what if as you say, right, these are all breach of contract terms. So under these facts, right, you seem to be suggesting that Tom can only throw Catherine out if she breaches the contract first. Is that correct? Okay. So what happens if Tom does throw her out and she hasn't breached the contract? Tom would have breached the contract, right? So this is the answer, right? Is that a contractual license can be revoked at any point. Okay, you guys, do you guys read Oliver Wendell Holmes in jurisprudence? You guys read his stuff at all?
We're supposed to.
Well, okay. I too was a college student once upon a time, so I'm well aware of that particular phenomenon. So Holmes says that a contract is nothing more than a promise to pay damages in the event of breach. That's it. It's just a saying that, you know, if I don't do what I'm agreeing to do, you can get money out of me. And so Tom absolutely has the right to go, you know what? I don't want you to live here anymore. Here's some money, go away. Right? That's perfectly fine. What about Jim? So let's start by asking this question. What contractual relationship does Catherine have with Jim?
Would it be the same because it's like he's passing on, um, Tom is like passing on everything to Jim, so like um, would she remain the same? I guess that's my question.
So the answer to your question, Kira, is that you have jumped ahead. You are talking about equity now. Bryce is correct. At law, Jim has no contractual relationship to Catherine. Why? Because you can't produce any evidence of an agreement between Jim and Catherine on these facts. That's what we're looking for when we ask for a contract at law. Okay? But Kiera is correct that there are equitable considerations. Okay? So at law, Jim has no obligations whatsoever to Catherine. Once the property is sold, Jim can do whatever he wants. He can throw her out. He can repaint her room. He can chop up her dresser for firewood. Maybe not that last one. But like there's no obligation that he has to protect her rights because her agreement was with Tom. And equity goes, that doesn't seem fair, right? So what does equity start asking? Equity starts by asking, can we provide a remedy here? Right? Equity says the limited scope of equitable remedies, right, of injunctions and specific performance is that something that we can meaningfully do here? What do you think?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Sure. Equity's first question is, do our remedies have any meaning here? Can we do anything for this by instituting an equitable remedy, right? Specifically, equitable remedy, specifically an injunction or specific performance. I mean, they're interchangeable, Bonnie, right? It's in this circumstance, there's no difference between an injunction and specific performance. So it's just a question of, can you accomplish anything with these remedies? Okay, what can you accomplish?
With okay, I think this is dealing with the specific performance aspect of it, right? I guess the law could require that the formalities are complied with.
What formalities are missing?
Well, the lease is missing. Well, the lease from the original with what was the guy's name? Tom. The lease with Tom is missing, and then she now has to make new formalities with Jim.
Well, let me stop you here and ask, where in this fact pattern do you see any evidence that a lease is intended?
Well, true is not that it is intended, but
so why would we order a lease that was never intended?
okay, well, I was just using a lease as an example of a formality, but I guess anything written could be used. Any written agreement could be used.
But if you don't have a lease, if all you like, a license doesn't suddenly acquire more rights because the license is written down. So I think that the notion of ordering the formalities is problematic in this case because there's no formalities that will comply with the intent of the parties and also provide any meaningful relief. So I think we're on the right track, but I'm not sure that this does what we want it to do. Okay, so Bonnie says that we can provide Catherine with a place to live until she can find someplace else, right? Basically, like, yeah, it's basically an injunction saying thou shalt not evict, right? You know, you can provide specific, you can phrase it as specific performance by saying thou shalt provide, thou shalt, you know, provide a license on the same terms as Tom. Okay. So there's something that can be done here with equity. The question is, will equity do it? Okay, that's the next question. And the issue basically amounts to do these facts give rise to a situation where it would be unconscionable to throw Catherine out. Bonnie says yes. Why, Bonnie?
I say yes because Catherine was invited by Tom and they have like a familiar relationship, and she was there, she was cooking, she was doing repairs, and she did all of that. So I think it would be unjust to just throw her out after everything that she did.
I mean, okay, but why does that bother Jim? Keandra, say more about this. Well, that's not, we don't know that from the facts. We know that Tom um, said he couldn't pay as much as the old job. Um, so, Bonnie, I'm going to put a pin in that. There, we're going to come back to that in a minute. But um, uh, Keandra, you're starting down the right track, right? This is a really important fact that she gives up this job that pays very well to move into Firefly, knowing that Tom isn't paying as much. Okay. What are the elements of estoppel? I
A right held by one person based on an assurance given by another, which the first person relied on and was led to believe was permanent.
right. So you and Keandra are sort of saying the same thing, right? We have a promise, right? Tom makes a promise. We have reliance on that promise, right? Catherine quits her well-paying job, and to her detriment, right? She takes this pay cut, and now she's being thrown out of her house. So we have the elements of estoppel. Okay. The problem becomes, how much does that estoppel apply to Jim? Okay. And and the answer is that equity is probably going to say, well, Catherine, you're entitled to some time, right? I think Bonnie may have said this earlier in the chat, that she's entitled to a period of time where she can continue to live in Firefly while she sort of sorts out her affairs. But estoppel only protects you from third parties for so long, right? Okay. So this is the puzzle, right? This is how the final exam is going to be structured. You have this fact pattern, you're being asked to analyze it in light of certain legal issues, and the first step is to figure out what issues you have to analyze at all. Okay? So, so that's the first piece of the puzzle, right? And I hope that this conversation today has helped you guys to sort of wrap your heads around how to answer these types of questions. So what questions do you have about what we've talked about today?
My question, probably not more of a question, but more of a clarification of Catherine's interests with what's his name? Tom? With Tom, yeah. With Tom. Right. So if you could just go over that again for me, please.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I think your first question was whether Catherine had a legal interest. I think that was your first question. No? Yes?
Well, it was what kind of rights does Catherine have? Okay, because she doesn't have any sort of the term interest in land is a specific term that has a specific meaning in real property. And so she has no interest, right? She has no legal interest. She doesn't own the land. She doesn't have a tenancy. What she has is a license, okay, which is a right, but not an interest. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great. Okay. What other questions do we have? So, so the answer to that is that if there are court cases that you have seen or read where you think the facts are analogous. So, for example, right, in this situation, if you had a case where somebody left a job to go be a live-in cook and handyman, right, or handy woman, for someone else's property, then you could sort of connect those cases in that way, right? You could say this is like the case of Smith versus Jones, where Jones, left their good job in the city and working for the man every night and day, to go and be a live-in cook and repair person. So that Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. But again, sort of focusing on cases is not the best mechanism here. It's far more important for you to focus on the concepts. The cases should sort of be add-ons. So once you have the concepts nailed down, then you can start learning cases. Okay. What other questions do you have? Okay. Questions going once? Questions going twice? Okay. Well, I'm going to let you guys go a little bit early today, and I will see you tomorrow, and we'll talk to you later. Take care, and bye.